All right, Rabbi, let us begin today's daf. So first of all, to thank our sponsors, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsor for the month of Adar, on this last day of Adar, the Learner Mishpacha, for dedicating all of the Shiurim and Droshos this month in memory of Mrs. Dina Lerner Gerber and in the merit of her Aliyas Neshama. To thank our sponsors for a week of learning, Jack Bennett, for dedicating learning in memory of Captain Dora Barshai, who served and died as Deputy Commander in the 51st Battalion of the Golani Brigade. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, his neshama will have an aliyah. And to thank Mordechai and Malki Tusk for dedicating the learning this week in honor of Brina's marriage to Aryeh Nierenberg that occurred just yesterday. Baruch Hashem, Mazel Tov to the Chassan and Kala. In the merit of our learning, may they be showered with the Sheva brachos and beautiful brachos ad mea ve'esim shanim tovos. Mazel Tov to the Tusk Mishpacha. All right, so with that, let us begin. So we do have a lot to do today. Today's daf is Yud Tes 19. As you know, we are picking up from Yud Ches Amud Beis 18b. So if you remember again, we are picking up Vahashta de Amar Mar. So pretty much it's like in the middle of the page. Pretty much in the middle of 18b. So the Gemara says as follows. So remember, yesterday we got into some very interesting concepts regarding Shem Yechata, a concern that you may come to go ahead and adjust the heat source on Shabbos. So we'll say, we're going to see this in Yetz Hashem a bit later on when we come to the halachos of bishul. When it comes to the halachos of eating, so we're going to see this, or I should say not eating, the halachos of cooking, or the prohibition of cooking on Shabbos. So we'll discuss that part of the concern of maintaining food on a flame on Shabbos is a concern of Shem Yechata, a concern that a person may go ahead and come to adjust the flame, which of course is a problem of havara, of kindling, and also could be potentially a problem of bishul, of cooking. So the Gemara says, now again, this is not that sugya. This is not that sugya. We'll deal with bishul by itself a little bit later on. So the Gemara says, V'hashta da amar mar, gezerer Shem Yechata b'gechalim. Now that we spoke about this idea that there's a concern that you may come to adjust the heat source, you are permitted to go ahead and put a pot of raw food into the oven on Erev Shabbos. My time, what's the reason for that? So we'll say, just bear this in mind, because later on when we get to the bishul sugyas, this actually is exceptionally important. So for example, we'll see later on that halacha l'maisa, in order to maintain food on a fire going into Shabbos, the food has to be somewhat cooked in order to obviate any concerns that one may come to adjust the heat source to accelerate the cooking process. Interestingly enough, what we'll see is that halacha l'maisa, the food must be either a certain amount cooked or totally raw, which is fascinating, right? But what's the idea of totally raw? This is the concept of kedera chaisa, a raw pot of food, because when something is raw, the assumption is you're not eating it Friday night. If you're not eating it Friday night, then there's not going to be a concern that one may come to go ahead and manipulate the heat source in order to accelerate cooking. So therefore the Gemara says, you see from here, so it's like I said, we'll see this sugya later on, but you see from here that you could put a pot of raw food into the oven before Shabbos, and there is no concern that one may come to adjust the flame. So the Gemara says, Ubashil Shabbos, similarly, if something is fully cooked at the onset of Shabbos, there's also no concern that you may come to manipulate the flame. Bashil velo bashil, what happens if something is partially cooked? Asir. Then ultimately, again, it will be prohibited to put it in the oven on Erev Shabbos, lest you come to manipulate the heat source. So we'll say, so you begin to see over here, we'll get into a whole discussion regarding a blech, right? A blech effectively covers the heat source. We'll see all of these sugyas later on. And here Abba the Gemara brings down an incredible kula that it comes by Hilchos Bishul, which is if you throw in a raw piece of meat into that pot of food, that one raw piece of meat converts the entire pot into a pot of raw food, and therefore allows you to put it into the oven even right before Shabbos. So the Gemara goes right to Vahasha, the Amar Mar, Kol Midi di Kashele Zekalo Maglule. I will say now that we said based on yesterday's daf, that in general, if something is in the oven on Shabbos, so halacha l'maisa, if opening the oven will allow a draft in, and the draft will ultimately be detrimental to the item that's in the oven, we are not concerned that you will come to go ahead and open up the oven. Hai bisra de gadja v'sharik shapir dami. If you have the meat of a gedi, right, of a gedi, of a kid, of a lamb, so I will say that's very tender meat. And ultimately, again, apparently, if you're cooking it in the oven and you then go ahead and open the oven, it's actually detrimental to the meat. So therefore, when it comes to this lamb meat that is being cooked in the oven, the sharik, now this is very important, sharik Rashi says, and you covered, so sometimes it will say when they were cooking something in an oven and they didn't want the oven to go ahead and be opened, so they would go ahead and put like clay around the opening of the oven to temporarily seal the oven. So if you're going in and you're cooking lamb meat, which is tender, right? You're cooking a kid, and you cover and you seal up the entranceway of the oven. That would be a situation where we would have no concern that you would come to go ahead and manipulate the heat source on Shabbos. The bar chavalo sarik aser. But if you're cooking ram meat, Rashi says barchas ayel gadol, a large ram, where the meat is a little bit tougher. So because the meat is tougher, therefore halacha l'maisa, there is no concern that one would come to go ahead and, therefore the draft that would come into the oven would not have a negative impact. Visharik, so what happens if you go ahead and you have the ram meat cooking in the oven and the oven is sealed, right? It's with clay. So is there a concern that you may come to open the oven? So the Gemara says, the bar chavalo sarik aser. If you're cooking ram meat and the oven is not sealed, then obviously that is going to be aser on Shabbos. I have a concern that you may open the oven and manipulate the heat source. So what about the gad yavalo sarik or the bar chav sarik? What happens if you're cooking the meat of a gedi, but you didn't seal the oven? Or the meat of the ram, but you did seal the oven? What happens in those cases? Rav Ashi shari, Rav Yirmiyah difti asir. So Rav Ashi says it's permitted, because Rav Ashi says all you really need is one qualifier in each case to go ahead and remove the concern about stoking the fire. But ultimately, again, Rav Yirmiyah Midifti says that it is aser. Ul Rav Ashi dishat solobeitza alakadesha tzulmi ba'od yom. But according to Rav Ashi, said you could do this, but we learned in our brayso that in general we're not permitted to roast meat or an onion or an egg on Shabbos. The only way you could maintain it on the heat source is halacha l'maisa if it was cooked before Shabbos. Hasam the bar chavalo sarik. The meat that is being referred to in that brayso ultimately again is ram meat where the oven is not sealed. So if the oven is not sealed, that's where there's a concern that you may come to go ahead and manipulate the heat source. Ika de Amir, another version of this, Tegadyo, bein sark, bein lo sark, shapir dami. Others say that if it's the meat of a kid, then halacha l'maisa either way, whether the oven is sealed or unsealed, it makes no difference. Since the opening of the oven will be detrimental to the meat, therefore we assume that a person is not going to do it, and therefore it is not problematic. The barucha nami b'sharik, shapir dami. Similarly, again, if you have ram's meat in the oven and the oven is sealed, that's also okay, because even though, again, opening the oven and the draft won't impact the meat, but you have the reminder not to open up the oven as a result of the fact that the oven is sealed. So what's the machlokes? Ki pligi, the bar chavalo sarik. So ultimately, again, the machlokes is what happens if you're cooking ram's meat, but the oven is not sealed. The Rav Ashi shari, because ultimately, again, Rav Ashi says that it is permitted. Rav Ashi says that it is permitted. Rabbi Yirmiyah Difti says that it's aser. Or Rav Ashi, the Shari, according to Rav Ashi, says that it's permitted. Ain't solin basar or batzal beitza el kadesh yotzim ba'od yom. But it says, the Raisa says that you can't roast meat, an egg, or an onion unless, of course, they're fully roasted before the day. So the Gemara says, hasam bebisra agmuri. That's actually referring to meat that is being roasted over open coals. So because it's over open coals, therefore again, the heat source is there, it's exposed, and therefore halacha l'maisa, it would be much easier for a person to come to manipulate that heat source. Rabina. So Rabina says, Hai kra chaya shaper dami. So we'll say, so apparently again Rabina says, kra is a gourd. A raw gourd, it's okay to put that on the heat source before Shabbos. Because ultimately are permitted to put in the oven. Because why? Since if you open up the oven, the draft would be detrimental to the gourd. Therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, it is like going ahead and cooking the meat of a gedi, which we are not concerned that you may come to open the oven to manipulate the heat source, because the opening of the oven would be detrimental to the meat itself. So both say, so that brings a close to that particular sugya. So just again with the Gemara, so just this is a good introduction to the bishul sugya, to the laws of cooking, which we will get into in Meretz Hashem a little bit later on in the Masechta. But just see here that the concern with having, so let's take a step back for just a moment. We paskin like Beis Hillel, namely that there is no din of shrisas kelim on Shabbos. There's no problem for your utensils to quote unquote do malacha on Shabbos. We have this all the time. We set our lights on a timer, right? Our air conditioning goes on. There's other things. So there are things that ultimately, again, our utensils do work on Shabbos. So therefore, that is not a problem. The problem sometimes comes up is if those utensils make noise on Shabbos. Noise could be a problem. Noise could be a problem. But the idea over here that so therefore, using that logic, if I go ahead and I put food up to cook before Shabbos, there should seemingly be no problem with that food cooking into Shabbos. But now we begin to see the only potential problem that does exist is not really an issue with my oven doing work, but it's more an issue of concern that I may come to manipulate the heat source in order to go ahead and accelerate cooking. So what you just saw over here in the Gemara are essentially the Gemara trying to figure out when do we have that concern and when don't we have that concern. So that's the end of this sugya over here, but just bear in mind, this is going to be the sugya we're going to come back to when in Meretz Hashem we get to the laws of bishul, the laws of cooking on Shabbos. Good? So the Gemara goes weiter. Tan Rabbanon, sorry, Beis Shammai omrim ein mochrin. So we'll say another thing in the Mishnah that was said, was Beis Shammai said, you can't go ahead and sell merchandise, or for that matter, again, help to a Gentile, or help load up merchandise on the donkey of a Gentile, or help load up merchandise on the Gentile himself, unless, of course, Beis Shammai says that he's going to get to his destination before Shabbos. Beis Shammai's concern is that if people see the Gentile walking around with merchandise that people knew at one point in time did belong to the Jew, the concern is that people will think that the Gentile is transacting business on behalf of the Jew. That's Beis Shammai's concern. Beis Hillel says, we're not concerned. Once you go and you give it to the Gentile, it's his, and there's nothing more to talk about. So it says the Gemara Tan Rabbanon, Beis Shammai omrim lo yimkor adam chafetzo lenachri. So Beis Shammai says a person should not sell merchandise to a Gentile on Erev Shabbos, v'lo yashilenu, v'lo yilabenu, v'lo yitin lo b'matana, ela kedei sheyagia lebeso. Nor should you lend him something, nor should you gift him something, unless, of course, he has enough time to reach his home before Shabbos. So Beis Shammai essentially says you can't give or gift or transact any business with a Gentile on Erev Shabbos with merchandise, unless, of course, the Gentile is going to be able to get home before the onset of Shabbos. But if he's not going to get home, the concern is if he's traveling on Shabbos with the merchandise of a Jew, the concern is that people will think that he's transacting business on behalf of the Jew. Beis Hillel says, no, it's enough if he gets to the house right next to the wall of the city. So Beis Hillel seems to be saying that the Gentile doesn't have to go ahead and get literally to his destination. He just has to get, sounds like, close enough to the city in which he lives. So there apparently were always some people, we'll see this more in depth in just a moment, who would live outside of the wall of the city. So as long as he could get to the domicile outside of the wall of the city, which is his intended destination, that's enough. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Kadesh Yetze mi Pesach Beso. Rabbi Akiva says, no, all we need is for the Gentile to leave the Jew's home before Shabbos begins. As long as the Gentile leaves the home of the Jew before Shabbos begins, we are good. So it says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, Hein divrei Rabbi Akiva, Hein divrei Beis Hillel, Lo ba Rabbi Akiva el lefarish divrei Beis Hillel. To which Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Akiva is not a new shita. Rabbi Yehuda is actually coming to qualify Beis Hillel's statement that all Beis Hillel need is you could transact business with a Gentile on Shabbos, you could sell him merchandise. The only thing we need is that the Gentile needs to leave the house of the Jew before Shabbos begins. As long as he leaves before Shabbos begins, while he's out of Jewish property, then there's no concern that it's going to look like he's transacting business with a Jew on Shabbos. Beautiful. Says the Gemara, Tana Abanon. We'll say, Halacha l'maisa. Beishamai omrim lo yimkar adam chemtzo lenachri ela imkin yodea bo sheyechala kodem ha'pasat to Beishamai. Listen to this, what we'll say. Beishamai says, you can't sell chametz to a Gentile unless, of course, you're absolutely sure that the Gentile is going to finish up all of that chametz before Pesach. Why? Because what are we concerned about? We're concerned that people are going to know that this is Yiddish chametz, right? This is Jewish chametz, and they're not going to know that the Jew sold it to the Gentile. They think maybe, again, the Gentile is holding it for the Jew, and people are going to see that the Gentile is consuming Jewish-owned chametz on Pesach. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, if you want to go ahead and sell chametz to a Jew, to a Gentile, he must finish it all up before Pesach. Beis Hillel says it's not a problem. Beis Hillel says no. As long as you're allowed to eat it, you could sell it. And the idea is, and once you sell it, it's no longer yours. There's nothing more for you to worry about. And I will say that is, of course, how we paskin. Rabbi Yehuda says, top of your test, Rabbi say, kusach habavli b'chol minei kusach asur limkor lama yom kol Pesach. So it's very interesting. So Rabbi Yehuda says, kusach habavli. You know, kusach is everybody's favorite dip, made out of moldy bread, soured milk. Again, I'm sure it was great. So Lamaisa, again, the issue with kusach is it has a very, very, very long shelf life. I guess it makes sense. Once the bread is already moldy, once the milk is already sour, like what else is going to happen? So Lamaisa, it had a long shelf life. So Rabbi Yehuda says that halacha Lamaisa, you shouldn't sell kusach to a Gentile within 30 days of Pesach, because apparently people would keep kusach for after 30 days. So we'll say, so this obviously reflects the view of Beis Shammai. We paskin like Beis Hillel, which is, no, as long there's no problem with selling chametz to a Jew. As long as I can eat it, I can sell it. Once I can no longer eat it, I can't sell it anymore either. Although again, Hilchos Pesach, that's not totally true either. There is a point in time, we back up the time in which it is usher to eat chametz. So there is time where I still can't eat it, but I can still sell it. Good. Tana Rabbanan. No stims also the akela b'chatzer. Not lo v'yatza in his kakila. Both if I put out chametz, if I put out food for a dog, so there's a whole discussion over here exactly like whose dog is this, but we're not going to get into this now. You'll see what the point that the Gemara is making is, I put out chametz for a dog on Shabbos. I don't have to be concerned that the dog is then going to carry that chametz outside and perform an act of hotzah. In other words, once I put it out for the dog, I'm done with it. The chametz is no longer misyaches, it's no longer connected to me, and therefore whatever the dog does with it, the dog does with it. So the Gemara says, Kiyot Sebo, no stim mizonos with ne'anochri. Someone will say, I can give mizonos to a non-Jew on Shabbos, b'chatzar, not lo v'yatza, in his kakin. So let's say I give chametz to a non-Jew on Shabbos. I need not be concerned that ultimately, again, the non-Jew is going to go ahead and take the chametz outside of my rishus into another rishus. That's of no concern to me. So the Gemara says, once I give away the chametz is not whether I'm giving it to an animal or whether I'm giving it to a nachri. At the end of the day, once I give it to someone or something, then halacha l'maisa, I no longer have any connection to that chametz. So the Gemara says, Hasulam. So we'll say, so again, so isn't the case of the nachri and the kelev the same one? In other words, we'll say, not chas v'shalom equating the nachri to the kelev, but you understand what the Gemara is saying is that conceptually it's the same thing. I'm giving chametz to a quote-unquote third party. What does it matter if that third party is a kelev or the third party is a nachri? At the end of the day, what the Gemara is saying is once you go ahead and you give your chametz to someone or something, then no matter what that someone or something does with the chametz, it doesn't impact you. To which the Gemara says, I'll tell you the difference Mao detema harami alei v'hailo rami alei. So this is very interesting. There might be an obligation ultimately again for me to go ahead and give food to the dog. Why? Why? Because l'maisa again there's a din of tsar bali chayim, or it could be that it's my dog. I have an obligation to feed my animals, but l'maisa, quote unquote, there's no obligation for me to give food to the nachri. Right? There's no obligation. So I might have thought maybe the only time that I don't have to worry about what happens to the food, I don't have to worry about what's happening to the food, is when, how was I tell you, it's mamish like tests my ability to concentrate. I see David Flum sitting there with a black hat. Menachem looks like he's taking a tour through a haunted house. Mamish, it's all right, incredible, good. It tests my. I feel like this is like extreme dafyomi. I have to, under all conditions. Okay, this says the Gemara as follows. So therefore, again, halacha lemaisa, what I begin to learn is that at the end of the day, I have an obligation to go. Let's see, because I would have thought, in the case of the Nachri, I have no obligation to give him mizonos. Maybe because I have no obligation, therefore that chametz is still tethered to me in some way. And therefore, if the Nachri subsequently takes it out, maybe again, I have some chiyuv. Okay, good. Says the Gemara, Kamash Malon. So Kamash Malon, that at the end of the day, once essentially you put down chametz for someone else to take, whether it's the kelev or whether it's the nachri, that chametz is no longer mine, and therefore whatever happens to it, happens to it. Tan Rabbanan, lo yaskir adam kelev v'nachri be'erev Shabbos. So we'll see very interesting sugyas now. So a person should not go ahead and rent out his utensils to a nachri on Erev Shabbos. So we'll say, remember, this is all. So what we're continuing over here, look at Rashi. Lo yaskir adam kelov, lasos pem malacha b'Erev Shabbos, dinir shemaskir lo l'tzorach Shabbos. So we'll say, listen to this. On a technical level, if my Gentile neighbor comes and asks to borrow my tools or my lawnmower or whatever else, and he's asking to go ahead and borrow it Erev Shabbos, on a technical level, there should be no reason, there's no problem with that. The concern that we run into is if people see the Gentile working with my kelim on Shabbos, there's a concern that people will think that I contracted him to work on Shabbos. If they see him using my utensils, so remember, I want to be clear, Meker Adin, if the Nachri borrows my utensils and does his own work with them on Shabbos, that's not a problem. Why is that not a problem? Remember, because we paskin like Beis Hillel, which is there's no din of shvisas kelim on Shabbos. My utensils don't have to quote unquote be at rest on Shabbos. There's no obligations. Therefore, if I want to lend out my toolbox or my lawnmower to the Nachri Erev Shabbos, that's not a problem. The concern that's coming up over here is a concern ultimately that people will think that he's doing work on my behalf. So if they see the Nachri riding around on my lawnmower on Shabbos, they may think that halacha l'maisa, he's working for me on Shabbos. That's the concern. So therefore the Brisa says over here, you can't lend your utensils to a Nachri on Erev Shabbos, but if it's Wednesday or Thursday, it's not a problem. Similarly, in Mishalchen Igros Biyad Nachri be'erev Shabbos. Similarly, you can't send letters. With a non-Jew on Erev Shabbos. So both say out of concern again that it is going to appear that he's doing malach on my behalf on Shabbos. However, b'dalet v'hei mutter, but halacha l'maisa on Wednesday, Thursday, it's totally fine. Amra love Rabbi Yossi HaKohen. They said about Rabbi Yossi HaKohen, va'amri le'a Rabbi Yossi HaChasid, shelo nimtza ksav yado b'yad nachri me'olam. That ultimately, again, they say about these great rabbis, Rabbi Yossi HaKohen or Rabbi Yossi HaChasid, they never sent letters with Gentile letter carriers. They're always concerned that if their letter was found in the hands of a Nachri on Shabbos, people might think that the Nachri is working on behalf of Rabbi Yossi HaChasid or Rabbi Yossi HaKohen on Shabbos. Therefore, they were very careful never to deposit their letter with Gentile letter carriers. Very interesting. Tan Rabbanon. In Mishalchin Igeres Biyad Nachri Erev Shabbos, you cannot go ahead and send a letter with a Nachri on Erev Shabbos, Ela Imkin Chotzeitz Lo Damim, unless, of course, you set a particular wage. Now, I will say this line over here is exceptionally important when it comes to Hilchos Shabbos. Take a look at Rashi. Ela Imkin Chotzeitz Lo Damim, Rashi says, the Kevan de Chotzeitz Lo Damim B'didei Tarach. Supposed to listen to this. The assumption is that if you set a wage with a Nachri, with a Gentile for a particular service, then when the Nachri does that service, he's no longer really quote unquote working for you, but rather he's working for himself. So in other words, if I engage a Nachri to do something and I tell him, I'm paying you $500 for this task, $500 for this task. And I'm not necessarily even telling you exactly when it is that it has to be done, but I'm giving you $500 for the task. Once I engage him in that way, the assumption now is that the Nachri is working, quote unquote, for himself or for his own interests. Look at Rashi again. Kevan de katzis lo damim, since you established a price for the service, bididei tarach. The Nachri is considered to be working for himself. So Rashi just points out over here that this only works according to Beis Hillel, not according to Rashi. So we'll say, again, it's beyond the scope of our shir this morning to get into this, but this is this concept that sometimes when you engage the Nachri, not on an hourly level, or for that matter, again, not even necessarily on a strict timeline, but you engage him ultimately to do a task, and that task then has a dollar amount associated with it. Interestingly enough, in the eyes of halacha, it's almost as if the Nachri becomes like an independent contractor at that point. The moment that that price is set, he's working for himself. He's working for himself, and whatever he does or doesn't do, we'll say, so this comes up all the time in Hilchos Shabbos. All the time in Hilchos Shabbos, where halacha lamaisa, I engage a Nachri to do something, and again, I can't explicitly instruct a Gentile to work for me on Shabbos. That I cannot do. But let's say I engage him to do a task, and it's a task. This happens the whole time. It's a task that's going to take a couple of days, and he chooses to work on Shabbos. That's absolutely fine. There are many caveats to that. This doesn't apply necessarily to things that are being done in your house, which are more public sphere. But again, there's a variety of different examples of this. But it's all based on this idea of katzatz lo damim. Once the service has a defined price tag to it, and again, there's not an explicit timeline that demands the Nachri's work on Shabbos, then halach lamaisa, he's bididei uvduda. Ultimately, again, he's working for himself. So the Gemara says, so the Gemara says, one second. Beis Shammai says that it only works, you can only send a letter with him if he's able to get to his intended destination before Shabbos. Or really what it means is, Beis Shammai says you can only send a letter with the Nachri if the Nachri has the ability to get to the home of the intended recipient before Shabbos. Beis Hillel says, no, it's okay, even if he could just get to the home outside of the wall of the city of his intended destination. But 1 second, you just said before that according to Beis Hillel, once you set a price with the Nachri can do whatever he wants, right? Then there's no worries anymore about what the Nachri is going to do or not going to do. So the Gemara says, this is what it means to say. The imlo katzatz. So Rabbi say, if you went ahead and you established a price with the Nachri, then pretty much the Nachri could kind of do whatever he wants. He wants to take the letter, Erev Shabbos, 2 minutes before Shabbos, as long as you're not giving it to him on Shabbos, it's not a problem. What happens if you did not establish a rate with the, you're going to pay him, but there's no established price? Shabbos say in that case, Beis Shammai says you can only send a letter if halacha lamaisa is going to reach its intended destination before Shabbos. And Beis Hillel says he doesn't have to get to the intended destination, but he has to get ultimately again to the home outside of the wall of the intended destination, which means you have to get close, but you don't have to get all of the way there. But 1 second, Beis Shammai, you just said before that halacha lamaisa, you can't send the letter at all on Erev Shabbos. And furthermore, even according to Beis Hillel, it sounds like lamaisa, you can't go ahead and send it unless of course, katzatz, you established a wage, to which the Gemara lo kasha, hadikvia beidar b'masa, hadol kavia beidar debasa. So we'll say, interestingly enough, I will say it's interesting. Beidar in this context is not a post office, right? Which is the modern Hebrew usage of it. Interestingly enough, dar over here means something different. Rashi says dar shilton ha'ir velo regilun lishlach egros. So we'll say doar was like the mayor of the city. So interestingly enough, the mayor of the city often used to go ahead and reside either right by the wall of the city, inside the city, outside the city. But the idea is that when the mayor was there, the mayor was someone who would often receive mail. So halacha l'maisa, what the Gemara is suggesting is as follows: that at the end of the day, if the mayor lives in town and he normally goes ahead and receives mail, so therefore you could send it even on Erev Shabbos, even low katzatz, because at the end of the day there'll be some place to deposit the mail. But if the mayor doesn't live there, that's when the Brisa said before that halacha l'maisa you can't send the mail. So we'll say, remember, for our purposes, halacha l'maisa, the way just to kind of give a broad halacha l'maisa application of this. So we permit a Jew to engage a Gentile to do malacha before Shabbos, even right before Shabbos. The stipulation is that you can't demand of the Nachri to do the malacha on Shabbos. So if I'm dropping off my car by the mechanic, so I can't go ahead and drop off the car by the mechanic and say 10 minutes before Shabbos, say I'll pick this up, Matzei Shabbos. That you cannot do. I could drop it off 10 minutes before Shabbos and say, you know what, I'll get it on Monday, I'll get it on Tuesday, I'll get it on Wednesday. And then in that case, if the mechanic wants to work on it on Shabbos, that's his business. That's his business. It's not my place to tell him when he should work, when he shouldn't work. I just can't create a situation where the Nachri must do malacha for me on Shabbos. That is the part that you cannot do. So we paskin like Beis Hillel that you could begin a process with a Nachri Erev Shabbos, and even if it technically continues on to Shabbos, that to a certain degree is irrelevant and totally fine, as long as I don't stipulate that it has to be done on Shabbos. Tan Rabbana, we'll say another fascinating sugya. Ein mafligin b'sfina pachos yom kol Shabbos. We'll say you can't get on a boat less than 3 days before Shabbos. Can't get on a boat less than 3 days before Shabbos. So we'll say interestingly enough, the Shulchan Aruch and Reish Mem Ches. I'm sorry. I'm coming back. So the Shulchan Aruch and Reish Mem Ches actually has a fascinating introduction to this. So we don't have time to get into it now, but I'll send out the Maramakum today. So the introduction, so Siman Reish Mem Ches and Aruch Chaim, the title of the Siman is Traveling by Boat on Shabbos. Traveling by boat on Shabbos. And the Shulchan Aruch begins with this idea that ideally you should not set out on boat travel 3 days before Shabbos. Now in the Hakdama, in the introduction to this sip, the Mishnah Berurah goes through a variety of different reasons. What's wrong with getting on a boat 3 days before Shabbos? Shabbos says, so there's a concern that maybe again, I may have to do malacha. Boat travel was considered to be sakanas nefashos. Am I putting myself in a makom sakana where I'm going to have to do malacha on Shabbos? Remember again, in a situation where there's a threat to life, you're allowed to do malacha on Shabbos. But should I proactively put myself in such a scenario like that? So if getting on a boat potentially puts myself in makom sakana, which will require me to do malacha on Shabbos. So although if I'm in sakanas nefashos, I can do malacha on Shabbos, but should I put myself in that situation? Other opinion says that halacha l'maisa, in general, boat travel required malacha, whether it was tying knots or other things like that. So don't put yourself. And I will say, then you have the other opinions who say it's a din in seasickness. So apparently, again, for the first 3-4 days of boat travel, that's when people would, I guess, normally get seasickness. Chazal did not want us to be seasick on Shabbos Kodesh. Okay, so the idea is, therefore, we don't go and set out on boat travel within 3 days before Shabbos. Remember, when is that so? The Dvar HaRishos. But so that's only if you're going ahead and going for some type of optional purpose. Aval Dvar Mitzvah Shapir Dami. But I will say, halacha l'maisa, if you're traveling by boat for some type of mitzvah mission, you have to get somewhere for mitzvah purposes, then you are permitted to get on a boat, even Erev Shabbos, as we're going to see. Uposek imo almanas lishbos ve'eno shoves tirei Rabbi. So what's very interesting? Rabbi says, but ideally what you should do is when you get on the boat, you should stipulate with the captain that halacha l'maisa, I don't want to travel on Shabbos. And even though you know the captain is going to ignore you, it's okay. Meaning at the end of the day, what the Jew has to make the declaration is, from my perspective, I have no interest in traveling on Shabbos. I don't want the boat to travel on Shabbos. I'm happy to dock for Shabbos. If the captain says, okay, noted, but I don't care what you have to say, we're traveling on Shabbos, it's still fine for you to get on. You just have to make that declaration. Rabbi Shmuel says no, there's no need to go ahead and make that declaration. So the Gemara says, and to travel from Tzur to Tzidon, afilu berev Shabbos motor. So I'll say here what the Gemara is saying is to take a short journey, let's say from Tzur to Tzidon, which was less than a day's journey. That journey you could go ahead and do even on erev Shabbos. So we'll say, so this discussion is actually quite fascinating in general about boat travel on Shabbos. In general, is quite fascinating in terms of the halachos, in terms of the limitations. But again, that's you see in the Pirush of the halacha. Halacha telling you ideally not to disembark within 3 days before Shabbos. Tan Rabbanon, ain't sudden ala yarosh shal nachrim pachan tekim yom kodem Shabbos. Similarly, if the Jewish army is going out to war, we don't lay siege to a city within 3 days of Shabbos. The idea being that if battle doesn't have to occur on Shabbos, we'd rather battle not occur on Shabbos. So don't start laying siege to a city within 3 days of Shabbos. They mischilu, but if for some reason they did begin a siege within 3 days of Shabbos, ein mafsikin. At the end of the day, you don't stop. You don't stop. The pasuk says that if you go to war, right? If you go to war, right? You must fight until you vanquish your enemies. So what's an incredible yesod, first of all, in the ethics of Jewish warfare, fight to win. Fight to win. That's how at least ideally the Gemara says that Jewish armies should fight. But Lamaisa, what it also tells is an incredible Moser, which is that once you start something, do not stop until you finish it. So again, once you start the siege, finish it up. And the truth is, it's not just a siege, it's any initiative in life. Once you start something in life, finish it. Because if you don't finish it immediately, then chances are it will not get done. Tanya. So what Reb Tzadok says, this was the minhag. I'm sorry, I skipped it to that. No, again, so remember again, the Mishnah said, Rabbi Gamliel said that in my father's home, halacha l'maisa, what was the lashon of the Mishnah? They would only go ahead, they would only give kli lavan, they would only give white utensils to the launderer 3 days before Shabbos. Whereas they wouldn't give the white utensils to the launderer within 3 days of Shabbos. Only 3 days before Shabbos. So the Gemara says, we'll see. Tanya, I'm going to say the kachem in Hagol Shabbos Rabbi Gamliel. This was the custom of Rabbi Gamliel's home. Shernosin klei lavan lekobes gimel yamim kodem l'Shabbos. They would give white garments to be laundered 3 days before Shabbos. White garments are harder to launder than colored garments. So they would give the white garments to the Gentile launderer 3 days before Shabbos. This way, giving him sufficient time that the garment could be laundered before Shabbos. Utzvu and afilu be'erev Shabbos. But colored clothing, they would give to the launderer even erev Shabbos. Apparently, to clean a colored garment takes much less time. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, even erev Shabbos. Umidivreim lamadnu, and from their words we learn, shalavanim kashin lechabsan yosem inatzvuin. Ultimately, from their words we learn what Rabbi was saying, that it is harder to launder white clothing than it is to go ahead and launder colored clothing. And you'll say to yourself, okay, that is a fantastic and important conclusion. So Rashi points out over here that actually is a very important conclusion for schar kobes, how much money you pay a launderer. So apparently, again, the amount of money you pay to launder a white garment is going to go ahead and be more money than you pay to launder a colored garment, because there is more effort in laundering the white garment than it is ultimately, again, in laundering the colored garment. So we'll say, the Gemara says as follows: Abai haviyoivle mana ditsiva lakatzra. Abai was one time giving a colored garment to the launderer to be laundered. Amarle kama baisile. Abai said to the guy, to the launderer, how much? Amarle kidechivra. The guy said, don't worry about it. I charge the same price for colored garments as I do for white garments. Amarle kevar kidmuch rabbanan. So Abai said to the launderer, the rabbis were on the lookout for guys like you. Right? So the rabbi says, this is why Chazal said that it is harder to launder a colored garment than it is to launder harder to launder a white garment than a colored garment. So therefore, again, the colored garment should be less money. You're overcharging me for laundering a colored garment. Amar Abaye, Hayman diav mana lekatsa b'mishcha, neisivlei b'mishcha nishkamine. So when you give a garment to the launderer to launder, when you give it to him to launder, you should measure it, and when you get it back, you should measure it. Why is this? Di tafi afsidei. Dimachte, because if you get the garment back and it's larger than when you gave it to the launderer, that means that it has been stretched. The ibatzir, and if the garment has shrunk, or I should say, if the garment is smaller, the kavtse. Ultimately, again, it has shrunk. So therefore, the Gemara telling us that Allah you give clothing to the launderer, ultimately, again, know the size of the garment you are giving. Good. The shavin elu ve'elu shetonin. So we'll say, then the Mishnah goes on. And the Mishnah explains very beautifully that halacha l'maisa, both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that you could put the olives and the grapes underneath the press on Erev Shabbos, even though, again, they're going to press down on Shabbos itself. So we'll say, so this is very important, because even Beis Shammai, who said that there's a din of shvisas kelim, therefore you cannot begin any process on Erev Shabbos that will not be complete before the start of Shabbos, agrees that you could put grapes and olives into the press on Erev Shabbos, even though they're going to continue to get pressed on Shabbos itself. To which the Gemara asks this question: Maishna kulu d'gazru b'hu Beis Shammai, or Maishna koros Beis Abad v'gule hagat de lo gazru. So why is it that Beis Shammai says by all the other cases you can't have malacha continue into Shabbos, your kelim can't do malacha, yet by the press they allow it ultimately again to quote unquote continue into Shabbos? To which the Gemara says very simple: Hanach di avdu b'Shabbos mechayev chatas gazru Beis Shammai erev Shabbos simcha shecha. Koros Beis Abad v'guli hagati avelu b'Shabbos lo mechayev chatos lo gazru. So very simple, I will say. By everything else in the Mishnah that Beis Shammai was gozer on, if you were to do any of these items l'chatchila on Shabbos, you would be chayev b'chatos. There's an isur d'oraisa. Apparently, leaving stuff in the press on Shabbos does not create an isur d'oraisa. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says over here, well, actually not yet. So we'll say, so therefore the Gemara is making the following distinction. Beis Shammai is only gozer on things that you can't do on Erev Shabbos. If you were to do them on Shabbos, it would create a biblical obligation, a chiyuv chatos. But anything that if you were to do it on Shabbos itself would not create the chiyuv chatos, Beis Shammai is not gozer. So the Gemara says, let's analyze this. Mantana, now we'll say, now why is that? The assumption is because when you put stuff in a press, everything else kind of just happens on its own afterwards. There's no active malacha being done. That's why Beis Shammai seems to indicate to us that halacha l'maisa would be okay. So man tana d'chol midid yasim memela shapir dami. Who is the opinion who holds that halacha l'maisa, anything that kind of happens on its own, anything you were to do, and the rest of the process happens on its own on Shabbos, would not be a chiyuv chatos? Rabbi Yossi Chanina, excuse me. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, Rabbi Shmuel. It's Rabbi Shmuel. Disnan Hashum v'habos Rabbi Malilo Sheraskmi Bod Yom. If you have garlic or unripened grapes, or malilos are pieces of wheat, shibol and stalks of wheat that are not fully mature. So we'll say, so what happens? And you put these items underneath a stone. Sheraskami ba'od yom. So you go ahead and you mash them up before Shabbos. Rabbi Shmuel Omer Yigmar Mishatechshach. Rabbi Shmuel says that halacha l'maisa, once you've mashed them before Shabbos, you could put them underneath the stone even on Shabbos itself. And halacha l'maisa. I'm sorry, you could go and put them on the stone before Shabbos, and halacha l'maisa, whatever happens afterwards is okay. So we'll see Rabbi Shmuel's of this opinion that halacha l'maisa, once you've begun the process of essentially mashing or grinding up the items, putting it underneath a heavy beam to extract the rest of it is not really an isur d'oraisa. Rabbi Akiva Omer Amud Beis. Rabbi Akiva says, Lo Yigmar. Rabbi Akiva says, no, halacha l'maisa, you can't put them underneath the press before Shabbos. So it should just be very clear. Rabbi Shmuel's case over here is where you took these items, you began to already crush them before Shabbos. So Rabbi Shmuel says, under those circumstances, you could put it underneath the beam, underneath the press before Shabbos, and let the rest of the process unfold on Shabbos. Not a problem. Rabbi Akiva says, you cannot do that. Rabbi Akiva says, halacha l'maisa, you can't do that. You can't put them underneath the press even before Shabbos, because then the malacha continues into Shabbos. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Elazar Amar, Rabbi Eliezer he. So Rabbi Elazar says this. Rabbi Elazar says it reflects the Rabbi Eliezer. What does Rabbi Eliezer say? Disnan chalos tevasher erev Shabbos. Well, if you ever take a honeycomb, and you break apart the comb before Shabbos, now what happens? That means the honey will flow out itself on Shabbos itself. So we'll say, so what's the status ultimately again of the honey that comes out? So the Gemara says, V'yatzu me'atzman aser. So we'll say, first opinion says that halacha l'maisa, it is aser. You can't eat that honey on Shabbos. Rabbi Elazar says that it is permitted. So we'll say, so again, Rabbi Eliezer is of the opinion that stuff that kind of just flows out on its own on Shabbos is going to be permitted. This would be reflective of the view of Beis Shammai in the Mishnah, that halacha l'maisa, as long as you put the items underneath the press before Shabbos, anything that flows out of it on Shabbos is not a problem. Why does Rabbi Chanina not say like Rabbi Elazar? He would say the following: in the case of the honeycomb, hasam hu demeikara ochel lebasof ochel. So we'll say the honeycomb, it was honey while it was in the comb, and it's honey when it's outside of the comb. So the object itself has not really changed in any dramatic way. You've just simply moved it from one location to the next. Hacha neikara ochel. Vahashta mashke. I will say instead, by the case of the liquid inside of the grapes or inside of the olives, in the beginning when it's a grape and an olive, it's ochel, and then afterwards it's mashke. You're changing the state. So maybe the only time that you're permitted to go ahead and partake of something that comes out on its own is when the item itself doesn't change state. It was honey in the combs and it's honey outside of the combs. But if you're taking something that was a food, for example, olives and grapes, and now what's coming out of it is a liquid, who says that you can enjoy that on Shabbos? To which the Gemara says, Amar Lecha, Hasham. So the Gemara says as follows. Hacham Eikar Ochel Vashta Mashka. Rabbi Elazar, Amar Lecha. Rabbi Elazar will say to you, Hasham Inale L'Rabbi Elazar Dafilu Zeisim Va'anavim Nami Deshari. And I will say the Chiddush over here is that according to Rabbi Elazar, this is even permitted in a case of Zeisim Va'anavim. Now I will say we're going to see when we get to the halachos of schita, the halachos of squeezing out liquid. You're not allowed to squeeze out liquid from a fruit on Shabbos. Right, that we know. That's part of the malacha of mefarek, the malacha of dash, of threshing. We're going to see, however, that not all fruits are created the same. Zeisim va'anavim, so for example, olives and grapes will have a chi of da'araisa. So again, we'll get into all of this. So the Gemara says, you see from here, that halacha l'maisa, even to put grapes and olives underneath the press on Erev Shabbos is going to be okay. Daha, kias raboshia minarda, asava aisi mas nise biadeh. Because when Roshia came from the Arda, he brought the Mishnah in his hand, and what did he say? Zeisim va'anavim sheriska me Erev Shabbos, the yatzu me atzman asurin. If you have grapes and olives that you mashed up on Erev Shabbos, this is before you put it in the under the press. You just mashed them on Erev Shabbos, and now what happens? The juice oozes out on Shabbos itself, so the juice is aser. The juice is aser. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon matirin. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon ultimately say that it's mutter. Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. And Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon say that it's mutter. Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina braysa lo shmiele. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, he never heard this braysa before. Rabbi Elazar, my tamalama Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. Why does Rabbi Elazar not hold Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina? To which the Gemara says, Amar Lecha, Lav Itmar Allah, because it was said regarding this idea, Amar Rava bar Chanina, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, B'mechusarin dika, to kuli amalo pligi. We'll say if the items in question are mechusar dika. Now mechusar dika means they have not yet been pounded. In the process of going ahead and extracting liquid from fruit, there are essentially three different stages. Three different parts. So when ultimately, again, the fruits have not yet been pounded, to kuli amalo pligi, everyone will agree that halacha l'maisa, it is usher to go ahead and put it under the press, because putting it under the press is the final stage. Keep ligi. So ultimately, again, where does the machlokes come up? B'mechusar and shrika. Maishi, you'll do me a favor and get ready to daven, so we still have a chance to make vasikin this morning. So keep ligi b'mechusar and shrika. So we'll say, so ultimately, again, when is it that halacha l'maisa? When is it that halacha l'maisa? There's a it's okay when they're missing mashing. So we'll say again, Rashi says shchika yoser midika. So if the fruits have essentially already been prepared to a heightened level, to a heightened point, where halacha l'maisa again, all that's left is this last part. They've already been prepared, and all that's missing is this last piece. then ultimately again it will be okay. Keep actually that's machlokes. Keep ligi muchsar shchika. V'hani nami, these particular fruit in question ki mechusar indika are as if they are just missing this last stage of pounding. So the Gemara says, Hor Rabbi Yossi Rechanina Rabbi Shmuel. Ultimately, Rabbi Yossi Rechanina paskind like Rabbi Shmuel. Good. So we'll say, that pretty much brings to an end this sugya. So bottom line, we'll say, what comes out is as follows, is that halacha l'maisa, Beis Shammai essentially says that although we normally say your kelim cannot do work for you on Shabbos, halacha l'maisa, this case of placing the olives or placing the grapes underneath the press is going to be okay. For the simple reason that halacha, there are a couple of different interpretations as to why this should be permitted. But bottom line is that according to Beis Shammai, essentially what's occurring is an element of passivity. That's what's happening over here. The grapes and the olives are not doing anything. The press is not really doing anything. It's just the force of gravity that's occurring over here. That's one possibility. The other possibility is that Beis Shammai only prohibits something that if you were to do it on Shabbos itself, would be a chiyuv d'oraisa, although that particular argument does not really seem to hold water, because at the end of the day, Beis Shammai even prohibits things like instructing a non-Jew to do things, which even if you were to do that on Shabbos, would not be an isur d'oraisa. So I'll say, but again, we're going to stop over here for today, but bottom line for our purposes is that halacha l'maisa, again, we paskin like Beis Hillel. So remember, again, we paskin that you could put into play pretty much any malacha process on Shabbos with with just two important caveats. Caveat number one is that when it comes to cooking, even if you started it before Shabbos, has the additional concern of shemiyachata, the additional concern ultimately again of that you may come to go ahead and adjust the flame. So we'll deal with that by cooking. The other possibility is you could put, according to Beis Hillel, processes into motion erev Shabbos, but if those processes make noise, you cannot have them go on Shabbos. That was the case of the water mill. And then the third caveat, according to Beis Hillel, might be that even according to Beis Hillel, you do have to be careful with what you instruct a non-Jew to do on erev Shabbos, because if it has the appearance that the non-Jew is transacting business on your behalf on Shabbos Kodesh, ultimately, again, that can be problematic as well. All right, Tabosai, we'll stop over here. We'll pick up with the Shemin Shel Bedadin in Mirz Hashem tomorrow. Shkoyach to everyone. We'll begin Shachris as soon as Moshe is ready. And hopefully this morning we will still make Vasikin. Tomorrow morning, just a reminder, it's Rosh Chodesh. So Mirz Hashem will begin at Daf Yomi at 5:45.